April Anderson County Board of Commissioners meeting to order. Vice Chairman Val is out tonight, so I'll go ahead and get us started. We'll start with an honorary resolution by Commissioner Varon for National Library Week. I guess Jay's, is he on his way with the... Don't have the resolution yet. Well, we'll come back to Commissioner Varon. We'll have a presentation by the Coalition Against Human Trafficking, and in place of Brittany Thompson tonight is, what was it?
Right now?
Yeah.
All right. Where would you like me to stand?
Just at the podium there.
Okay, great. Fantastic. Can you all hear me okay? Wonderful. Hello, everyone. My name is Lisa Bolton. I am the Director of Youth Services with the Community Coalition Against Human Trafficking, and I would like to share with you today a little bit about what human trafficking looks like in East Tennessee. So, by a show of hands, how many of you have heard of human trafficking before? Yes? Okay. So we're all familiar that this is an issue, and it is an issue in our community. Sometimes we do hear misinformation, though, from the news, from maybe TikTok. TikTok likes to share lots of misinformation sometimes. Maybe other social media sites like Facebook, and oftentimes this is how you hear the story. It is usually, my child was at a park, we were hanging out with our family, and a white van pulled up, and a creepy dude got out of the van and tried to steal my child from me. Has anyone ever heard this story before? Yeah. It's actually a really, really scary situation, right? And this does happen in our community where someone might try to take advantage of a young child, try to steal a young child, try to kidnap them. This does happen. However, I'm here to tell you today that this is not human trafficking. Here in East Tennessee, we have never worked a case that was a kidnapping case. We've never seen a kidnapping case that turned into trafficking, which might be surprising to you because that's what the news tells us. We recently saw up in Ohio last year that a woman was jogging down the road, and there was a lot of misconceptions that that woman was going to be trafficked. They ended up finding her body, of course, and that was a very sad situation. She was a mother, but it wasn't a trafficking situation. So we see these things on the news, and it makes it very confusing as to what trafficking is and how it actually happens. So let's talk about that for a minute. It is not like the movie Taken. We do not see the kidnapping, like I said. We do not have the snatch and grab. Most often, traffickers are targeting middle school age students, so typically between the ages of 12 and 15. The reason for this is that middle school children are extremely vulnerable to life, right? Does anybody remember being in middle school? It was not fun, okay? We had braces, we were getting pimples, we were going through puberty, we were getting bullied, or maybe even a bully ourselves, right? Middle school was not fun, and traffickers know this. Traffickers also know that middle school age, 12 to 15, even sometimes 11 to 14, that this is the time that the brain is developing. Now, trafficker might not say, oh, I know brain development and I went to school for this, but they do know that their tactics work. So what is a vulnerability? A vulnerability means that someone is being capable of being hurt or harmed. Children are extra vulnerable because they cannot consent to things. Children are extra vulnerable because they're in places where they're developing, they're learning about their identity, they're learning who they are, and they have really low self-esteem or identity. They just don't know who they are. So traffickers come along, and there's kind of two types of trafficking that we see in East Tennessee. So we see labor trafficking and we see sex trafficking. Labor trafficking, are there any children in the room? No, okay, we're good. Just want to make sure there's no children in the room. Labor trafficking is when one person takes advantage of another person through force, fraud, or coercion and forces that person to work in some way. Typically, it is accompanied with unfair workplaces or workplace abuse and things like that. Here in our community in East Tennessee, we see this most often in restaurant work. We see this in nail salons or massage parlors. We see this in agricultural work. But we also see this in babysitting. We see a lot of young girls who are taken advantage of in the babysitting industry who are told that from a wealthy family, oh, you can come and you can babysit our children and we travel the world together, and you can travel the world with us as long as you watch our children. What ends up happening is that as that person, that it might be a child, maybe a 17-year-old, 16 or 17-year-old who's trying to babysit, trying to make some money, could be a woman. As she begins to do that babysitting job, it quickly turns sour. She begins to not get paid. They begin to tell her that she has to do things in the family that are more than just babysitting. Maybe she has to sleep on the floor. These are the types of situations that we're talking about here when it comes to labor trafficking. So one person taking advantage of another person in order to some type of debt or servitude, something like that. When it comes to our kids, when it comes to labor trafficking, we are seeing a rise in young boys who are being forced to what we call run drugs for a trafficker. So a trafficker will often ask a young boy, it's usually through coercion, to run a drug for them or a substance of some kind for them so that they do not get in trouble themselves. So we want to be in tune kind of in our community with young boys. Oftentimes we are quick to victimize a young boy, a boy who is maybe 16 or 17-year-old, and see them as a criminal instead of seeing them as a victim. And we are seeing a rise in that in our community, so I want you to be aware of that. We also are seeing a rise in gang activity as well. This used to be something we saw a lot in Chattanooga, but we are starting to see that kind of starting slowly coming into Knoxville. So we are keeping an eye on that too, because when it comes to gangs, there's a reason that gangs are so what we're going to call popular. The reason for this is that, once again, we're going to go back to that word vulnerability. So children are vulnerable. Children and teens want to be loved, they want to belong, and they want they just want to know that they exist in the world and that they're important. I would say that me as an adult, I'm almost 30 years old, I also want to be loved, I also want to belong, and I also want to know that I'm important in the world. So this is not a big ask of a teenager in our community to say, hello, I would like to be loved by someone. We all want to be loved, right? So oftentimes teenagers, and once again, if you remember being in middle schooler, they don't feel loved, they don't feel like they belong, they don't feel like they matter in the world. So a trafficker may come along and say, I will be what you need and what you're looking for. So that's the number one tactic that a trafficker will do when it comes to sex trafficking. Now, the common misconception is that in sex trafficking, that it's only girls who experience sex trafficking, and that is just not the truth. Men, women, and children can be victims of a trafficker exploiting them in this way. So how this usually happens is a trafficker will begin to have a relationship with this person. If you remember back just a minute ago, this is not a kidnapping situation, this is not a snatch and grab. Trafficking only works whenever they can build a relationship with their victim. If they're able to build a relationship with them, they can form something called a trauma bond. So instead of having to use force, fraud, or coercion to get someone to do that, suddenly they don't have to do those things because the trafficker has formed a relationship, and that victim is probably going to do whatever they ask them to do on their own, even though we know that there's relationship manipulation. So what this can look like, maybe it is a young girl, maybe it is a young woman, maybe she just turned 18 and she's got some serious vulnerabilities. Maybe she was just in foster care, or maybe she had to leave home because her parents kicked her out, or maybe she just got broken up with by her boyfriend. Vulnerabilities look different for everyone. I'm gonna tell you a story about that in my own life in just a moment. So maybe she aged out of foster care, she was 17 in a foster home, and when she turned 18, the foster parents told her that she had to leave. I've worked this situation many, many times. So now she's out on the streets, she's never had a home before, and she's looking for a place to sleep for the night. We know that after a girl or a boy in that age group leave home for the first time, or run away from home, or leave home without permission, either one, they go into the streets is what we kind of call it. They have about 48 hours before a trafficker finds them. 48 hours is not that long. So after that person is left, 48 hours later, we know that trafficker could find them and potentially convince them that they can give them what they need. So the situation of the girl that left home, maybe left the foster home, and she has nowhere to go. She has no food, she has no shelter, she has no identification, so she has to get that from someone, from an adult who can help her with that. So that's where the trafficker may come in and say, hey, you need a place to stay tonight? I can help you. You need some food? I can help you. But there's gonna be a price to pay. Now that price might not come up right at the beginning. It might not be the night that that trafficker first meets the victim. He might establish that relationship. They might start dating. He might fill the role of a father, might fill the role of a friend, whatever that vulnerability, whatever that hole is in that kid's heart, they're gonna start to fill that void. So let me give you an example of a vulnerability that looks like for someone else. So last year, December, actually Christmas night, I have 3 dogs in my house, and 2 of them decided that they wanted to get in an all-out fight. I don't know if you guys have any animals and if you've ever seen a dog fight, but it's really, really scary. So my 2 dogs got in a fight and ended up resulting in my husband going to the emergency room and one of my dogs going to the emergency room. Both had to have surgery. So on my way, it's like 1 o'clock in the morning, on my way from one emergency room to the other, guess what happened? I had to get gas, of course. That's what I get for never filling up my gas tank, right? So I find this really sketchy gas station in West Knoxville, Tennessee. I pull over, and of course, at 1 o'clock in the morning, there is someone else at the gas pump. So I'm already just a little bit nervous. I've spent pretty much most of my day crying because I've had to come to terms with the fact that my husband's in surgery. I had to come to terms that I might lose a dog. He might not make it through his surgery. And I had to come to terms that my other dog, I had to get rid of him. And I love that dog. If you've ever owned an animal, sometimes they're part of our families. So I was extremely vulnerable that day. I had spent a lot of time crying and a lot of times thinking about who's going to take my dog. So I'm feeling very vulnerable, right? We can all agree? So I pull up, I need gas, and here I hear this guy. Hey girl, you are so beautiful. What? That is the wildest thing. I've spent the past 6 hours crying. I'm in sweatpants and a bloody t-shirt because I had to bandage up someone's arm. There is no way that this person thinks I'm beautiful right now, right? What did this person see in me? Yeah, saw a vulnerability. He saw a woman at a gas station at 1 a.m. who was crying and looked like she had a rough day, and he was going to take advantage of that. And he thought he was going to take advantage of that. But that is not the case. Of course, I know the signs, my spidey senses started going off, and I pumped my gas as fast as I could, and I laughed and chuckled to make him feel comfortable, because that's what I do as a woman when I'm uncomfortable, is make that person feel comfortable. And I backed up into my car, I started my engine, and I got away safely by the grace of God. But that person, that could have easily gone a different way. He could have called out to me and said, hey, you are so beautiful. And I could have said, really? I'm just having such a hard day. Thank you for saying that. I could have fallen for that if I was not strong enough to overcome my vulnerability. And that's really what happens to many of these people, whether it be a man, a woman, or a child. They have a vulnerability of some kind that can be exploited. We all have vulnerabilities, but they're not always exploitable, if that makes sense. Most of the time, children's vulnerabilities are very exploitable because they don't recognize those vulnerabilities themselves. When I was at that gas station, I could recognize I was in a vulnerable situation. I'm not going to fall for this punk's idea of what beauty looks like at the gas station, right? I'm not going to fall for it. But maybe someone else might have. Now, caveat, was he a trafficker? I don't know. But he absolutely saw vulnerability and was trying to take advantage of that. And that's how that starts. He was trying to start a relationship with me. And when a trafficker sees a girl, maybe she ran away and she's on the streets, he's going to try to take advantage of her too by filling that void that she needs. So that's what I really want you to know today about trafficking when it comes to labor trafficking and sex trafficking. That it's not a snatch and grab, that is relational, and it mostly has to do with vulnerabilities. So when you are in your community, I've stopped kind of telling people what the signs of trafficking are, because you're not really going to be able to see what it is. I can give you the signs. I can tell you, oh, it looks like a tattoo like this, or someone saying this, or when a kid has multiple cell phones. I can give you 20 to 30 signs to look for, but 9 times out of 10, you're not going to see it. So instead of looking for the signs, I want you to look for the story. What is the story that is happening in our community? What is the story that is happening to the children who are being trafficked? What is the story of the men and the women in our community who are being trafficked? The story is that they're vulnerable. So if you want to end trafficking, that's what we got to focus on. We got to focus more on prevention and intervention, making sure that we're targeting vulnerable populations in a good way, helping build up communities, helping those who are low income or in poverty, helping our children who are failing in school, helping families be bonded more together, including domestic violence situations. There's a really great program called Healing the Home, where it helps to try to build men up in the community who are struggling to be with their families. We want to be able to target these vulnerabilities in a good way and help build them up. So let me leave you with this about the numbers that we're seeing. So we kind of call this trafficking the hidden in plain sight. So last year, we had 407 referrals that came through our hotline alone. We are just one nonprofit. We serve 33 counties from Chattanooga all the way through Knoxville up into Bristol. And that's how many we referred, or how many we got referrals for. These are just the people who either someone, a law enforcement officer, TBI, FBI, or they themselves finally recognized that they were in a trafficking situation and they reached out for help. And we know that that's a very, very, very low number. That's a very low number. We know that out of the 407, 213 of those were children. That's 213 children right here in our community who have experienced trafficking of some kind, either labor or sex trafficking. Now, this year, we've already received 5 referrals of children who have been trafficked in this county alone. This county alone this year. That number, we also know, is very low. We know that children are being victimized in every county and at a lower number than we recognize. I mean, there's a lot of reasons for that, but the big reason is we miss it. And a lot of times we don't realize what's happening, that a child is experiencing this in their very own home. We know that children are trafficked by family members, and we know that children are trafficked by people that they've maybe met online, or they've met at school, or they've met at the park. Once again, this is a relational victimization, so it takes that relationship. The trafficker's almost always going to be somebody that they know. So we want to make sure that we're listening to the story, and when we see a child who is vulnerable, that we're kind of paying attention to them, and that we're giving to them and giving to our community as best as we can. Now, does anybody have any questions about trafficking? Anything that I need to clarify or add to?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman. Yeah. These are crimes of relationships, you say?
Yes.
What are the other factors that are non-relational? For example, maybe there is a drug pusher in the neighborhood, and he's not related. He just, wants to take advantage of someone like that. So, and there could be some other factors that are not necessarily within the family,
Yes.
but outside the family. Maybe someone allows a child to go into a liquor store to buy liquor. Maybe someone allows a child to frequent into an adult nightclub.
Yeah.
So what other factor besides the family would be would make a child susceptible to trafficking?
Yeah, so we're going to go kind of back to those vulnerabilities. I think in all of the situations you're talking about, those children were vulnerable in some way. You said go into a liquor store and purchase something. Somebody dropped them off, right? So that was a vulnerability.
I mean, it could be some kids don't happen to be dropped off. They get dropped off at the ball game and they
walk over.
Yeah,
Yes.
so
Yeah,
I'm just talking about
absolutely.
situations where these kids are doing things that would contribute to them being more susceptible to trafficking.
Yeah, there are. I'm a social worker through and through,
Yeah.
and so a lot of times I see trauma. Many kids, trauma is absolutely one of the biggest vulnerabilities that a child can go through. And trauma looks different for everybody. Some kids experience a sexual assault at a very young age. We know that I think it's 1 in 5 girls before the age of 18 will be sexually abused by someone that they trusted and loved. We know that neglect is a huge vulnerability. And so if we've got kids who are experiencing neglect, abandonment, abuse in the home, maybe they turn 16 and they start to have these behaviors, right? But we don't know the backstory. We only know that they're maybe at the park spray painting the skate park, right? Or they're stealing vapes from the local gas station. That's what we see, and that would be a symptom, I think, of the trauma. But what we didn't see was what happened to them when they were younger. Most children, if they are raised in healthy, stable households, do not have behaviors like we're talking about, what we would consider like deviant behaviors. Now, it's not always the case, of course, but the majority of the time, trauma is kind of going to be our baseline, what's going on behind the scenes. Does that answer that question at all?
Sure,
Okay.
that's good, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
I can talk afterwards if I'm not being super clear. We can talk afterwards if I'm not
you're
being
fine.
very clear.
You're fine.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions? This is my bread and butter, so throw it at me.
Thank you for coming back.
Nothing?
We had Brittany Thompson at the operations
Yeah.
committee last week, and
Yeah.
operations thought it was important enough
Great.
that they asked you to
Yeah.
wanted to come back. And tell
Did
the
Brittany go
information.
over anything that I missed or that you would like for
No,
me to
I think
talk
it was
about?
a lot of
Okay.
similarities, but
Yeah.
you added some more stuff to it that we
Okay.
didn't hear last time.
Am
so
I better than
thank you
Brittany?
for
Just
that
kidding. Is this recorded? I'm just kidding. Well, wonderful. Well, thank you all so much for listening. Yes. Yes.
You handle how many counties?
That we serve 33 counties.
Okay,
Yeah.
33.
So
Now,
basically Hamilton County, and then if you kind of move
Right,
across the
that's-
street. No.
That's what I understand from Operations Committee. Where's the main base? I mean, how many people do you have working in this whole organization?
Yes. So we are located in Knoxville. Our base is in Knoxville. We have a shelter for women in Knoxville, and we have a long-term kind of healing program in Knoxville as well. We also have a separate office in Johnson City in Washington County, but we're about to hire our 25th person. So we're a very small nonprofit,
All right,
working our little tails off.
okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
we're growing every day though.
That's great.
Yeah. Oh, we also have a program in Pikeville. I totally forgot about that. They would be so upset with me if they heard me say that. They are in the prison in Bledsoe County. Yeah, so they have their base is actually in the women's prison, and they get to work with women who've experienced trafficking, who have been given charges maybe of prostitution or soliciting, things like that, and they've been put in jail for that. And we go in there and we work through their trauma with them. And so when they get out, they'll be ready to integrate into society.
Thank you. And could you give us your contact information for everybody that's watching?
Yes,
or
yes. So
the
my
best
name is
number for
Lisa
them?
Bolton. And so my email is Lisa, Lisa, Bolton, Bolton, like Michael Bolton, at ccaht.org. I'm glad you know who that was. Yeah. Somebody's younger than me. They're like, who is that?
That's Sheriff Parker's favorite.
My namesake.
He's got him on repeat.
And my phone number is 865-466-0936.
Thank you. Thank you
You're
for coming back.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
I got a question, ma'am.
Oh,
Yeah.
Commissioner White.
You mentioned a situation where maybe a foster parents, when a child turned 18, they would ask them to leave.
Yes.
I've never been around a foster child much, but aren't they wouldn't you develop a love or a caring for this child if you've had them in your house for
Yeah.
a while? Does that happen often when they turn 18?
Yeah. It happens before they turn 18. Yeah. Disruptions are very common. Disruption is what it's called whenever a foster parent no longer wants a child in their home. Disruptions are extremely common right now, especially after the pandemic. It increased the vulnerability of children, and it increased the behavioral issues. So most of the time, a foster parent is disrupting because the behaviors become overwhelming for the family. Yeah. And so when they turn 18, usually it's a situation of, it's either a behavior of some kind. Yeah.
So when they're turned out of the house, they can't come to a place like what you're talking about?
They can absolutely come to us, yes, if they know about us. They might not know that we exist, or that's most of the time is they just don't know we exist. And because they don't have a phone, they can't Google where to go. And so usually they just start walking, and then a lot of times people just pull over and say, you need a place to go? And that's how it starts. Someone taking advantage of them.
Scary. Thank you.
It is very scary,
Thank you,
yes.
Sheriff.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Okay, now we'll have the resolution for National Library Week by Commissioner Barron.
Resolution number 2304-1088, resolution honoring the National Library Week, April 23rd to the 29th, 2023. Whereas National Library Week is an annual celebration highlighting the valuable role of libraries, librarians, and library workers play in improving lives and strengthening our communities. And whereas libraries provide the opportunity for everyone to pursue their passions and engage in lifelong learning, allowing them to live their best life. And whereas libraries have long served as trusted institutions for all members of the community, regardless of race, ethnicity, creed, or socioeconomic status. And whereas libraries strive to develop and maintain programs and collections that are diverse as the populations they serve and ensure equity of access to all. And whereas libraries adapt to the ever-changing needs of their communities, continually expanding their collections, services, and partnerships. And whereas libraries play a critical role in the economic vitality of communities by providing internet technology access, literacy skills, and support for job seekers, small businesses, and entrepreneurs. And whereas libraries are accessible and inclusive places that promote a sense of local connection, advancing understanding, civic engagement, and shared community goals. And whereas libraries are cornerstones of democracy, promoting the free exchange of information and ideas for the citizens they passionately serve. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Anderson County Board of Commissioners meeting in regular session this 17th day of April 2023 that we honor the over 9,000 public libraries and 125,000 librarians in the United States and their efforts to educate our citizens and improve our communities. Be it further resolved that we proclaim April 23 to the 29th, 2023 as National Library Week in Anderson County. During this annual event, we encourage all residents to visit their local library and explore the wealth of resources available. These are our libraries.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
No speech?
We do want you guys to come out and visit us. We have lots and lots of pretty programs that we'd like you guys to come and see. Bring your kids, bring your grandkids.
Please come visit everyone. There's a library for everybody.
That concludes the presentation portion, and we'll start the regular business meeting here in about 30 seconds.